Hello everyone, Nathan here from PH Studios, and welcome to the Quick Tips Podcast. This podcast is designed to give you quick tips on programming usage or general topics for both XNA and C#, and they are meant to be short videos, just very quick tips. Sometimes they might be about 10 minutes long depending on the topic that needs to be discussed, but they only focus on one thing, which is the title of the podcast. So if you already know a great deal of the podcast and want to participate, I don't go that far in depth, just give you a brief overview on your building blocks of how to understand the topic. So if you already know a great deal about the topic, you're welcome to skip the podcast episode. But you can tell what the podcast is about just by looking at the episode. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this podcast. I hope it becomes pretty popular, and I hope we can keep on getting some interesting topics. This episode discusses access levels for C#. Enjoy! Hey everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Quick Tips Podcast. The topic of this podcast is to discuss access levels. Last podcast episode, we discussed the properties and how to use that with the field and how to get and set the field data. So the comments of that podcast, somebody mentioned why they would use a property instead of why not set the field to public access. So that brings us to this podcast episode, which is access levels. As you see here, we have a integer field which is privately set, access set. It's privately available. The default access, if you do not set one, is private. This access is public. It's the property, and we set it to public access. So, public int health. We have a get field which returns the field health. Now, here's the access levels. We have a private set of health. So, if you want to only allow people to get the data but not set it, you can have a public property with just get, and you don't really even need this actually. So you can have just get, and that will get rid of the we cannot set it here because we cannot set the value. So this is why you want a property along with a field. If you want to keep some of the access not available, or you want to restrict some of the access, you want to have a property. Maybe you want to only allow it private get and public set. I don't know why you'd want that, but you can do that if you want to. But anyway, let's discuss the access levels. Public. Anybody that can create a object of the ship class can get to the public field, public property, method, anything in there that is set to public can be available from the object. Private, like this int health, is only accessible by whatever is in this class. So a field can access a private, or a property can access a private field, a method can access a private field, and so can a constructor, and just anything inside the class has access to that private field. So I mentioned it in the last podcast that with the new C#, I believe it was a new C#, that you can do smart auto-generated properties type of thing. That's where we can just have a property here, and it will automatically generate the field on top of it at compile time, so we do not have to write the field and the property. I still forget about that, even though I'm creating programs and games for everybody. I still forget about the new C# having this ability. I'm still stuck on the old C# ways of doing things, so it's even taken me a long time to get used to it. Anyway, back to the properties. The next one I want to discuss is protected. A protected allows you to have access to not only that class, but any derivatives of that class. And we'll go into that when we discuss inheritance and polymorphism, the object-oriented programming paradigms. And protected allows us to have access. Anybody that is inherited of this class has access to this protected field or property or method. So that's what protected means. It's like private, but in the scope of every derivative and the scope of every inherited class. Abstract, it's not really an access level. We'll get to that when we discuss object-oriented programming. So the last one, these are the most common ones. The last one is internal. Now, I do not have a demonstration of internal, but internal is similar to protected again. It's just a much bigger scope. Private is the smallest scope, is just for that single class or whatever you're working on. For example, let's look at a private field. That field is only accessible to that class. Alright, the next one is protected. It has a bigger scope. It is for that class and any inherited classes or derived classes. So any classes that are derivative of the original one has access to it. Internal, it has a much bigger scope. It is the entire assembly. Internal means just this assembly. Protected means just this class and derivatives. Private means just this class. So those are the access levels. Public, anybody has access to it. Private, just this class. Protected, this class and any derivatives. And internal, this assembly. So I hope you get a better understanding on the access levels, and you can manipulate the properties and use that. You can have public property with a public get but private set. You can have a protected set. You can have an internal set. Things like that. Alright, so that's it for this podcast episode. There are 4 access levels: public, private, internal, and protected. And I hope you understand that you can use those with the properties, and it actually is kind of nice to have both a field and a property go together when you add in those access levels. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. If you want to have your questions asked in a podcast episode, remember I do these every week no matter what video I come up with. If I do a tower defense content series videos, if I do 3 of those, I will release a quick tips video. Because they're short and sweet, to the point, and I can get them out really easy. So these will be released every week no matter what, as long as somebody asks me a question that I can answer. If not, I'll try to come up with something interesting to say. So ask your questions, and your question might be answered. If you want yourself credited, just leave me a message or something. Just say, give me credit, my name is blah blah blah, something like that. Alright, so I hope to see you for the next podcast episode.